Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today what we're going to look at is cinematics again. So I have done another previous video on the level sequencer, and this is going to tie into that quite a lot, but essentially we're going to make an intro cinematic. So this is something that you'd find at the beginning of your game. So as you can see here in the scene, we're looking at a nice castle. This is actually the ruins, which is available on the marketplace. I'll show you that when we get into it. But what we've got here is it's a nice little scene. You've got touch to start, and when you hit start, you then fly in through the scene, and then you're presented with your menu. And then obviously you'd need to set up this menu to do a desired effect, but for this I've only wired up new game, and then when we hit a new game, this then slowly approaches the castle, fades out, and then you'd be taken to wherever you'd need to be. So for me that would be like a character creation screen or something like that, but the possibilities are endless for this one. But without any further ado, let's jump straight into it and get this built. Okay, so what we want to do to get started is I've just created a brand new third person example project, and one of the things that I used in the cinematic was I just used one of the packs off the marketplace. So let me just drag this over here for you. So what I used is the Infinity Blade Grasslands, and that gives you this brilliant temple castle looking scene, you know, which is really good for the fly through. Adds a nice cinematic edge. You can build the world if you want to, you know, but I just used the example map. That was good enough for me. And then my idea was that for the back end of the game, there's lots of modular dungeons which are free assets. You know, you can build your game out of that, but this serves as a good sort of cinematic for that. So you can get this for free, so I'm just going to add this to my project, and what did I call it? Cinematic tutorial. I'm going to add that. I think it is maybe a gig or so, or maybe just shy of a gig, so this might take a couple of minutes just to add to your project, but once that's done, we'll come straight back to it. Okay, so that's all done now, so we can just minimize the marketplace. So in your in Unreal, if you go down to your content folder now, you'll see Infinity Blade Grasslands. Now, if you open that folder and go to maps, you will see the Elven Ruins as one of the maps. Double clicking on this will load this up. This may also take a few minutes because there are, you know, a lot of like lighting and bits and pieces like that. So, you know, and it may render shaders or compile shaders for a little bit. As you can see, everything's got like a slightly green tinge to start with. So what I'll do, I'll wait for this just to finalize, and then I'll come back again. Okay, and there we go, that's all finalized. What I actually needed to do, I needed just to press play, and that kind of just helped push it over the edge for finalization. If you do seem to keep a green tinge on a few bits and pieces, just hit play and then exit out of the game. That should fix that. So with all that said and done, let's make a start. So one of the things that you'll notice is there's a player start. Now we're not actually going to be using the character in this because it's just going to act as a cinematic, so we can actually remove the player start altogether. And one other thing as well, there's this map is actually set up with some cinematic angles already sort of placed in the scene. We don't need any of those either. So what you can do is in the search in your world outliner is if you just type in cam, you can see there's only two actually, so we can just select both of those and delete those. We don't need them because I don't really want any other cameras getting in the way when we're setting this up. So what I did is I just flew around the map. You know, that's just holding the right mouse button, WAS and D. Let's just fly around the map, and I was just looking for some nice cinematic areas, and I'm just like, let's see, could this be one? You know, could I start here and then fly through? You know, I was just thinking of like, I want to progress through the map and find a nice little place where I can set this up. Where would I want it to be? So that's where I ended up starting at the statue at the beginning. You know, it was quite, to be honest with this map, it was quite obvious. So I picked a nice location, you know, something like that. You know, get enough of the sort of structure here at the bottom to act as like a bit of a foreground, but then have enough of that castle in the background, which is quite nice. And then with that set up, just as a starting point, what I'd do is in the top left hand corner of your viewport, next to perspective, there's a little down arrow, and in this menu there's actually create camera here, and we just want a camera actor. Now you can pick sign camera actor and it should act very similar, except you know there are a few other settings. I quite like the way that the original cameras just look and feel. I just find they react predictable. So I've just got that camera there, and if you move away you can see that it's put a camera exactly where we were looking. And then if you want to like adjust that a little bit, if you right click on your camera you can pilot the camera actor, and essentially you're flying the camera now. So wherever you stop, the camera is going to be positioned. So if you didn't quite do it the way you wanted to, you can make some final adjustments. And then up here in the top left, you can't quite see it because of this blackboard and all the the lighting needs rebuilding. But there's an eject button and a camera button. If you just want to click stop piloting, which is the eject button, you'll then eject and the camera will be left where you've left it. Okay, so now we need to actually set up some way of recording some movement through the level. So we're going to do this with the sequencer. Now I've already got this open at the bottom here. If you just want to go to window at the top, and then you will see under cinematics, you'll see sequencer. Give that a click and you should get this little menu here. Now to start with, it will be blank because you've not got a sequence open, but we're going to fix that. So now you've got the sequencer. You can just tag it down here because you don't fit that much in there anyway, so just have that tag there and then you'll be good to go. Now also at the top of your viewport there's this cinematics button, and if you want to click on the little down arrow and you want to click on add level sequence. Now this is going to ask you for a place to save it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new folder and I'm just going to put sequence. Select that, and then instead of new level sequence, I'm going to put movie or intro sequence. Yep, hit save. And then what I'm going to do is going to open that up, and you'll see it here now in your sequencer. So what we can do now with the sequencer is, if you want to select the camera that you've put in your scene, you can, with it selected, you can now go to plus track in your sequencer. So go to plus, and then at the top you'll have actor to sequencer, and then because you've selected the camera, it'll give you the option to add camera actor to the sequencer. You select that. This will then now pull in your camera actor. It'll give you the ability to change a few bits and pieces, so by default it gives you field of view and all of its transform information. And then also what it's got here at the top is the camera cut. Now what the camera cut is, essentially it gives you the ability to switch from one camera to another. Now the way that this works is a little bit lumpy, but we'll get into that once we start adding other cameras into the scene, because when we're stationary looking at the menus, we're going to switch to a static camera rather than relying on the sequencer camera. It takes a little bit of error out of it. Now what it does, it allows us to switch between cameras. For the most part of this, we're not going to spend that much time using that, but just so you know what it's for. If suddenly your camera just turns off, well, I've moved that, haven't I? If your camera just suddenly turns off, or you find that it just cuts to a random scene, it may be worth having a look at that to see if that some other cameras joined in here, because as you add more cameras to this sequence, it will try and switch between them, and sometimes it can be unpredictable. Right, with that all said, now what we can do with our timeline. Now the time frame that you want your camera to travel through is completely up to you. Now this timeline's in frames. Now obviously our timeline is currently set up at 30 FPS, so 30 frames, this is going to be a second of time. You can change your time to seconds, but yeah, typically frames is a good way to work with. So what I'm going to do at the beginning, so 0, I want the position of my camera here's location to be recorded. So where it says transform, I don't need to drop it down because I don't need to individualize each of these, but if I hit this plus button, you'll see a little red marker appears now. And essentially this is recorded at frame 0, so right at the beginning, this is where I want my camera to be. And then what we want to do is we want to go so far in time and say at this point in time I want to be at this place. So I'm thinking 45 seconds in, you know, which is a second and a half. I want to be beside this statue because I think a second to travel there is probably good enough. And then ultimately I'm going to end up somewhere over there at the top of the stairs. So an easy way to do this is to right click on your camera and pilot it. Now what you can do is this will be set up using a spline which follows a nice curve. It doesn't go in straight lines, it tries to smooth out the motion for you. So you just want to kind of direct it. You just want to position it in a direction and allow the curve to take it that way. Now you can fine tune it, but I find that the curve works quite smooth and naturally, and when you start trying to manipulate the curve too much, it becomes a little it feels glitchy when you watch it back. So I'm in a position now which I'd want to record at 45 seconds, and it's just as simple as hitting that plus sign again. Now because we're piloted, if we adjust this timeline backwards and forwards now, we'll actually see a preview of that movement. So as you can see, we're going to move from here, we're going to move to there. And what you can do is you can press play and watch it as it would do. So there you go. Now that might feel too quick for some people, but that might be too slow for some people. I'll leave that up to you, but that's the basis of where we're going. And then in another 45 frames, so another minute and a half, no, maybe let's extend that. Let's go to 120 frames. At that point, I want to be at the top of the stairs. So I'm just going to right click now and fly through the scene. And I want to be somewhere, maybe like there. I want to get the statue in, but I also want to get these leaves in the corner here because it's closer to the camera and it gives a bit more life to the scene as well with them leaves moving around. So I'd be quite happy at this position. So again, I'm just going to press the little plus to add a keyframe. Now, one thing I will make you aware of, you can click this little key button here and it will automatically key. But I'd say be wary of using this because occasionally I'll forget to move the timeline and I'll move my camera and I'll forget that it's recorded a keyframe, and that's when you can start adding errors in there. Because I've had so much use of doing it manual, it's a bit alien to me. But if this is the first time using your sequencer, I suggest you could have a go. You might get into it a bit more, but after some time, you're used to what you know. And I'm not used to that, so just to make you aware that it's there, but I personally don't like using it. Okay, good time to save. Anyway, so now that we've put this last position there, I'm actually just gonna go back to the beginning and I'm just gonna hit play. So you see me moving the sort of cursor through the timeline there. One other thing you can do is in the bottom left hand corner, this little arrow with 2 lines behind it is go to front and it takes you right back to the beginning. I'm going to hit play and I'm going to see how that plays out. Perfect, I love it, that's great. So with all that done now, I'm just going to eject. And you can see here the camera is now at the end position. And if we move this cursor back, we'll be able to see the camera flying through, and you can see that it's following this line. Now this is the spline or Bezier curve which it follows. Okay, it's quite difficult to see with that background. You can faintly see there's a dark line running through the scene, and there's little, let's see if I can get there we go. I don't know if you can see it, but here around my cursor there's a little square, and that's this position that the camera's going to get to. So you can see here. Now what you can do, if something didn't quite feel right for you, so let's say I didn't want to see the edge of this statue as we go past it, especially in this position. So what I can do here is I can just go back to pilot. I can either rotate using my mouse, because I'm piloting, I'm in full control, and then essentially I can just press the click again, the add a keyframe, and it just overwrites the previous node. Now bear in mind, if I was one frame in front, it would make a new one, and then that would look very glitchy, so be aware of that. Make sure you're on the exact frame, and if you can't quite get on the frame that you've been on, these little arrows in front of and behind your add keyframe will allow you to skip to the next keyframe. So if I press the back arrow, it'll take me to this one, and if I take the back arrow again, it'll take me to the first one, and you can navigate through your points. So if you have found that you've made an error or a mistake, you can quickly jump to that mistake. Another thing as well, this timeline down at the bottom, because at the moment we've just got it set to the full width of our timeline. Your timeline might be 1,000 frames long, which then everything will look really tiny. You can actually grab the ends of these bars, and you can sort of like zoom into your timeline, and then you can just slide across. And that might give you a bit more visibility if you've got a lot of points. Let's say you're doing this on a larger scale. Okay. So I've made that adjustment. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the front, and I'm just going to press play and see if that looks alright. So for me, I like to include a bit of that. So I'm actually just going to press Control, and before I do that, I was going to press undo, but just before I do that, I'm just going to open up the rotation here and go to the next one. So I'm just going to watch them figures and just make sure that I am undoing that. So just to check, up at edit, undo is adding keys to the current time. Hopefully this is going to undo that change that I've just done. So there we go. So now I've just pressed undo, and it's put my camera back with that visibility of the edge of the fountain. So as we fly through, we're just hugging the side of that statue and flying straight past it. And I really like that. I think that gives it a good feel. So when we get to this point, we're going to want to pause, and then we're going to want to display a menu. But then after that, I'm then going to want to fly past this statue and up the stairs and to the top of the stairs. Now currently my timeline's not really got enough room in to do that. So currently the maximum's like 150, but we here at the bottom we have a view range of 165. So that's like past here. So I can there you can see like the maximum I can see is 165. Working range end and view range. I'm going to change the view range to maybe 450. So as you can see now, that's shrunk everything down. But you can see this little green line and this little red line here. That's the working range of my camera. So you know, at -8 is considered it's not started, and 152 it's considered ended. It's already ended. So all this is like free space. So you can either hover over this red line, and you'll see like it gives you the ability to click on it and drag it, and then you're now able to set your working range. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this until it's, you know, I don't actually know where I'm going to end just yet, so I'm just going to drag it to about 420 for that marker, and that gives me a lot of room to move through. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to click on this little next button and get to my last marker. And I'm currently still piloted my camera, so I still have the freedom to move. So from here, where do I want to go? So I want to fly over and be kind of like here. So similar to what I did down at the previous statue, I just want to brush the edge of the statue and then fly off past it. So now I'm here. I need to work out how much time that I want to take to get to here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it to seconds, and I'm just going to see how much time's passed. So I like to switch it to seconds to have a look at how much time's passed, but I like to switch back to frames to run with. Personal preference. So I'm about 4 seconds in here. So it took me 1.5 seconds to get to the first statue. It took me then another, 3.5 to get to here. So I'm going to go to 5.5 to get to this statue. So notice how I've moved the cursor backwards and forwards in this timeline. It's now changed my position back again. So because I'm still piloted, I'm just going to fly over and I'm just going to get back in that position. I'm now going to press plus to add a keyframe. And then what I'm going to do is to get to the top of the stairs, I'm going to go for 8 seconds. Okay, I guess we're leaving it in seconds now. I'm then going to fly up to the top of the stairs, which I think here's... Maybe I'm just going to use your scroll wheel whilst you're in the fly mode, by the way. If you use your scroll wheel, you can actually slow your camera down, so you can fine tune it a bit more. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit the plus. And then over another 2 seconds, let's go to, yep, there we go. Over another 2 seconds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly to here. Actually, I don't think 2 seconds is going to be enough because I want it to have almost like a slow motion crawl effect. So I'm just going to slide this back to 12, or not forward to 12, not back to 12, forward to 12. And I'm just going to press plus. But now I don't want this previous one. So I'm going to go back. And over here in just some empty space, if you want to select and drag, you can select the node and I can press delete now. But alternatively, you can just click on it too. Press delete. So if you've got a couple of them, you can hit delete all in one go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the front. So this is right at the very beginning. So we've gone from here all the way up to here up at the top. I'm going to hit play now and see how this feels. Now bear in mind we are going to pause at the top here. That was a pretty good pause there. And then we're going to select a menu option, and then we're going to carry on. Oh, my computer glitched out a little bit there. Okay, I like that, I like that, I like that. The only problem is, for me, let's just go back, let's fly through here. Oh, I'm not a big fan of that. It kind of like flies towards and then jolts to the side a little bit. I'm not as much of a fan of that. So I'm just going to use the forward arrow, and I'm still in pilot mode, so nothing's really changed. I'm just going to look a bit more into the front, and I'm going to just jolt to the left a little bit, so I get a little bit closer to this statue. I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to take it back a couple, hit play, and see how that feels. Okay, it might actually be a bit too slow. Yeah, so I'm actually going to undo that change that I made. However, what I'm going to do, so in the timeline I got to 5.5 seconds, and that's where we're at the side of the statue. I think that's a bit too slow for me, so I'm going to pull back to 5, and I'm just going to click on this little node, and I'm just going to drag it back. And you can see here, as we're dragging it, it's telling me what difference I'm making. So on the left it's telling me you're at 5 seconds, and on the right it's telling me in brackets this is going to minus half a second off your time. That's what adjustment you've made. I'm going to let go, and then same again, I'm going to go back to the front, I'm going to hit play, and we're just fine tuning it just so it feels nice and natural. You know what, I think that feels miles better. You know what, I like that, that's brilliant. So there we've got our full cinematic. Now we just need to set up some stops and breaks. You know, now we've got our full cinematic, we just need to put the menus in now, and that's straightforward. So we got to about 12 seconds. Brilliant. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grab this end marker and I'm just going to pop it here. So our end marker is now on 12 seconds. So now we've got our full working range. So there you are, you've set up your full cinematic. I'm just going to have a sip of coffee, and then we'll be back to set up these menus. Okay, so just before we set up the menus, we're actually done recording our sort of camera trail, so we can now eject out of the camera, and that's just so we don't mess anything else up to do with that. And then a few other bits and pieces I just want to cover before we go. Now, if you've not already done so, you may have already noticed, if you press play, you're still loading in a character. Now, this is a menu, so we're not going to need a playable character. Now, the only reason that this spawns is because we've got a game mode set up, which is telling the game when we press play we want to, you know, our default sort of character is the third person character. Now, we just want to get rid of that. Now, if you're only going to be using this is a cinematic, which I doubt that's the only reason you're going to be doing this. You can just use the game mode that we've got and just remove, I'll just show you. Under the current game mode, under blueprints and project settings, edit third person game mode, you can see here that the default class is third person character. You could just set that to none, because we don't need that. But thinking that you might be building a game afterwards, you might not want to do that. So I'm just going to revert that back to third person, and what we can do is we'll just set up a new one specifically for this. So if you want to right click in your content folder, go to blueprint class, and we want to go game mode base, and let's just set this to GM for game mode underscore intro, something like that. Now if you double click on that, it'll bring up this, and we're only interested in this stuff down the side, to be honest. And under default pawn class, we want to set that to none. Spectator, to be honest, the rest of that kind of doesn't need to be messed with for now. Player controller, I guess we can set that. That's just leave it as it is. Hit compile and save, and then we can close that. Now, what you want to do is you want to also open up your project settings. So go to the edit menu. This will only appear if you're on the actual map. If you're in a different screen like this, for example, go to edit. Well, it still shows actually, but you want project settings. And then that'll open this. It'll open up your project settings window just like that. So just to clarify, edit, project settings, and it'll bring you to this. Now, what we want to do is up at the top left, we've got maps and modes. Now, here's another good thing as well. As well as being able to set the game mode, we can also set what the map starts up when we first load the project. So if you were to close your project now and reopen it, it'd go back to that third person example map. I'm going to change that to Elven for both of them. So now the default map and the editor startup map is both this map rather than the third person template. So apart from that, so default game mode we've got here, third person game mode. We're now going to set that to GM underscore intro. Drop that down, and we're just going to make sure that the default class is still set to none. And with that all said and done, you can now close out of that. Now when you press play, hopefully it'll give you this weird blank nothing. And then what we can do is I'm just going to press, because it's glitched out a little bit. Luckily I've still got the camera actor still selected in the scene. I'm just going to press F on my keyboard and it's just going to fly me back to here. If you don't do that, just type in cam and you'll find it. Select it and press F and it'll take you to it. I want to set this as my sort of like camera for when we press play. So with it selected, you'll notice here in the details panel, if you scroll down, it says auto player activation, and you want to change that from disabled to player 0. And if you press play now, when you press play, this camera is your default camera for the scene. Now obviously because of the sequence, we're right at the back, we want to set that to the front. But don't worry, we're going to automate this with the heads up display anyway, so now that's sorted, that's good to go, and we can move into the heads up display. Okay, so for the heads up display, let's start with a folder. So let's create a new folder and call that HUD. And then inside that folder, what we're going to do is we're going to right click, go to user interface, and we're going to create a widget blueprint. Now this one's going to be called main HUD or main HUD, and essentially this is going to be a container for all the bits and pieces that we make. So this will just house all of the buttons and stuff. It won't actually have functionality per se. You know, you won't click this HUD itself, but you'll click the buttons within it. That'll make more sense in just a minute. So next what we want to do is go to user base again, and let's create another widget blueprint. And this one's just going to be a start button or start game. You know, start button is probably more appropriate because this is actually going to be the clickable button for our game. So let's open start button. Just tag this to the top. Right, and what I'm going to do, just a quick disclaimer, I am awful when it comes to making heads up display. I might have already said that, but I'm terrible at it. So bear with me. If I make a mistake, I'm just going to try and roll with it and make the best of a bad situation. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in a border, and I'm going to drag that under my canvas. Now I've changed this actually from fill to desired on screen. So desired on screen is what size I want it to look like once it gets on the actual screen. So by default you get a canvas, and now a canvas is just like a placeholder for all the rest of it. I believe it's not completely required. You can replace that with an outline or a border or something like that, but I run into issues when I do that, so because I don't have that much experience with it, if I'm honest. So for my border, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that as like a base. Now it can only have one child. That's the only downside to a border. Like I can't drag two things into here because it says that it can't have that many children. So I can only have one child. So if I drag that into border now, you cannot accept additional children. So you can only have one. Which I'm not too fussed because I'm gonna drag in another container which is gonna be able to hold multiple things, so that's fine. But a border has a colour, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this as like a background colour for my button. Now over on the right you can see slot, canvas, panel, slot. This allows us to set some sizes, so I'm gonna set this size to 700 on the X and maybe about 60 on the Y. And I think that'll be okay, so I'm just going to move over here so it's in the middle of the screen. Now with that border selected, what I'm going to do is under appearance there's brush colour. I'm going to click on this, and you've got RGB and then you've got alpha. Now alpha is just transparency, so I'm going to set this to 0.1 and give this a very thin I'm going to make it slightly transparent, or mostly transparent, so it just gives a bit of a dull background. Okay, so on the left under the palette I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look for panel, and there is two which I'm going to give a shout out to because they're brilliant. We've got vertical box and horizontal box. Now these are essentially almost like a list, if you will, except vertical as the name implies, you know, stacks things vertically. So every item you drop in will be one under each other in a vertical pattern, whereas the horizontal box would be, you know, the opposite way, horizontally. Now this is good when you want to sort of order stuff, because this naturally restricts stuff into a pattern. So I'm actually going to create like a white line at the top, a button, and then a white line at the bottom ish. So I'm going to use a vertical box. So I'm going to drag that onto my border. Now, as I showed you earlier, a border can only have one child, but luckily a vertical box can have several children. So that's sort of like cancelled that out. Now, what I'm going to do is, because the border actually has like a default white background, I'm going to use that, but I'm going to shrink the size of it down to act as a line. But first what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the padding from the vertical box. So if you select your vert box, up in the top right hand corner, the very first box is padding. I'm going to delete that. And that, well, I'm going to set it to 0. And essentially what that does is it gives us the full use of the box. And just before I carry on, I am just going to check to make sure none of the other stuff has padding either. So I think we're good there. So I'm going to scroll back to the very top now, and under the common tools, I'm going to drag another border, which gives me this thin white line at the top. Because it's in a vertical box, everything's sort of naturally squashed to the top. And then that's going to act as a top line. I'm then going to drag in a button on the vertical box, which then puts that next in line. And you can see here when you select an element now, it's giving me these arrows, so you can actually change the order of them in the list. But I want the line at the top, button, and then another line at the bottom. So for a line, I'm just going to use another border. So as you can see here, we've got a button sandwiched between two lines, and that's exactly what I want. Now, good thing about a button is they can also take children. So let's add a text to the button, and that gives us a nice place to put our start game button. So by selecting the text block, and over on the right you've got a content box. Let's type in the text start game. Or you can put, you know, press to start or touch to start, whatever floats your boat really. Now essentially that's working, but obviously our button's got its own sort of style or background. I want to get rid of that style essentially. So now there's not actually a colour, there's just like what it normally looks like, and it's actually set like a weird gradient. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the colour picker, which is under tint in this instance, and I'm going to set the colour to 0. So essentially the button's transparent. Now that's when it's normally there, and when you hover over it, it's got another sort of design. So I'm going to set that to 0 too. And then when it's pressed, it also looks, it changes its style slightly. I'm going to change that to 0 also, because I don't want the button to appear at all. I just want the start text to appear as the button, rather. Okay, so now we've got some sort of like weird spacing issues. Now this is where things get a little weird, in my experience, for sorting this out. So you've got this size. Now it's set to auto at the moment, so it takes up as much room as it needs. And then you've got fill, you know, and each of the items within this vertical box have this, and it's how much space do you want them to all take. So if I set the button to fill, it's going to try and take up as much room as I've given it, 1 being all the space, 0 being none of the space. So if I set this to 0, you can see now that although that the text is there, one of the other borders is now sort of like above it. And that's because this border's like, well, the button takes up no space, so I can now be as close to this other border as possible. Now that's not right. So if we go back to the button and if we set that to, let's say, 0.9, again, it's still taking up. It's now taking up the majority of the space, which is good. And I mean, this is working how I want it to now. but you could set the rest of them to fill, and you could set them to like 0.1 or 0.05 it would actually be, and then you could set the top one to fill and 0.05 also, and then you get, so basically between the two borders they're taking up 0.1 of a distance, and then the button itself taking up the remaining 0.9. It gives you this nice sandwiched look. Oh, you know it's right, you know, nothing's left to chance. So with that being said, that button's now created. I like that. Now, you know, with some extra development, what you can do, you can actually set the visibility of the whole button. If you see here, what I've done, I've selected the actual start button itself, which is the entire widget, the entire thing. And there's actually a colour and appearance sort of parameter detail there. And if you lower the the alpha from 0 to 1, you get this sort of flash. Now, I'm not going to talk through it in this one, but if you go to the graph and sort of link up that colour and opacity to a pulsating of like an event, what you'll do is you'll get, if you saw my original at the beginning, the video at the beginning of this video, I'm starting to struggle to speak English here, but at the beginning of the video I showed a demo of what we were going to make. You could see that my start button was like a pulsating, sort of the opacity was changing on and off. You can set that up, but I'm not going to cover that because I want to try and keep it simple. But you know, there's all sorts of things that you can do to this now in the graph. But let's now go back. So close the start button because we've essentially made that now, and we want to go to the main HUD. Let's tag that to the top, and so we want to leave this one on fill screen this time because we want the main HUD to be the entirety of the screen, no matter what size it is. But what we want to do is we want to add our button that we've just made. Now, in your palette on the left hand side, at the very bottom, well, second from the bottom, you've got user created. Now, anything that you've made in another widget will appear here. So as you can see, start button's an option. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this on to the designer here, and don't worry about your spacing for now, but notice this little weird star thingy. Now what this is the anchor, yeah, and we don't want it anchored in the top left, we want it anchored in the center, because I want it to, no matter what screen size it's on, I always want it to work out where it should be based on the center of the screen that you've got. You can also anchor it from the bottom or, you know, wherever, but I'm going to go for the center. So if I click on it, what it'll do is it'll change the anchor, but it doesn't move any of this stuff. If I go back to anchors, and if you read at the bottom there, hold shift to update the alignment to match and hold control to update the position to match. So if I hold shift now and click, it's moved that more to be in line with that, but it doesn't really give you that much of a, you don't see the effect of that. So if I hold control and click, you'll see that now it moves the whole thing there. So what I want to do is try and center this as best as I can. So for whatever reason, the start button has been placed on the screen, but the size has been changed to something weird, which is 100 by 40. Now, if you remember, the size of our button was 700 by 60. So by changing this size, we've now centered it perfectly in the screen, as you'll see. So the only other thing that I want to do now is I want to move it down. So on the Y position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it down to a point where I think it might look nice. So I think about there will look alright, and I can see that it's now positioned in 380. So I'm going to change that to 400 just because I like whole round numbers, and I think that will look really nice. So if I hit compile now and play, nothing happens. Why? So this is because what we actually need to do is we need to tell the game to draw this HUD onto our screen, and this is where like the game mode comes in handy, because what we can actually do, we can go into the game mode, we can open up the blueprint editor behind it. Because this game mode is unique to this sort of like this menu, this intro, it's alright for us to put it in here, because it's unique to this. And once we get into the actual game, we're going to be using a different game mode anyway. So what we can do is, when the event begin play starts, what we want to do is create a widget. So if you type that in, you'll get given this, and what it's saying is, what class do you want to create? Now this should only bring up like heads-up displays. So as you can see here, we've got our start button and we've got the main HUD. Now because we've just put our start button in the main HUD, that's the one that we want to put on the screen. Now we're not done just yet, because what we actually need to do is tell Unreal where do we want to put it. So essentially all we've done here is created it as a widget in the world. But from this return value off here, if you just type in add to, now you've got player screen and viewport. Now they should both work, but let's go to add to viewport for this instance. So with that being said, now if we compile and press play, we've now got a start button, and as you can see, when you click on start game, you can see it bobbing, and that's actually the button itself being pressed. But as of yet, nothing works. You know, we've not set up when I press this button, what do something. We've not set that up, but let's get into that. So now we've done that in our game mode, we can close that for now. And this button, so we need to set it up that when it's clicked, do something. So at the moment, if you scroll right, if you select your button and scroll all the way down the details to the bottom, you'll get the events that you have the ability to change. Now currently the only thing we've got is on visibility change. Now that's going to be useful, because what we can do is we can go back to the buttons blueprint and we can say, once you clicked, disappear. And then essentially this main HUD, we can set up an event to say, once the visibility of this changes, i.e. it's disappeared, I want you to do this, this and this, so we can play our sequence, for example, our fly through the level. So we're going to use that, but first we actually need to go to this button. So up in the top right hand corner, if you've got the button selected, it'll say edit start button, so you can click on that and that'll just open up the other one for you. So with the button selected from your hierarchy, if you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see events. Now because this is a button, this gives us several different options. So once you've hovered over it, once it's been released, once it's been pressed, once it's been clicked. Now I prefer pressed. Clicked, typically a click sounds like a mouse click, and pressed I think is, it caters for all. So if you was to put this on a touchscreen device and touch it, that'd be classed as a press, but I'm not sure that without a mouse it would be, you know, if you picked clicked, I think only a mouse does that. I've never tested that on a touchscreen device. That's only a guess, but you know, I feel like it's a good guess. Either way, I'm going to select on press. So if you click on this green plus, what it'll do is it'll take you to the graph. Now, one thing I didn't mention is, when you start layering up this heads-up display, you probably want to start renaming your things. So let's go back to designer, and where it says button underscore 124, let's just rename that now to start button. Start button. And let's go back to the graph, and now you can see here that it's renamed this automatically for us. On pressed, start button. So what do we want to do once the start button's pressed? Now what I want to do is I want to change the visibility. So let's just nip back to our designer and let's just see what option names we've got which might sound like that. So on the start button, appearance, no, that's the color, import, accessibility, behavior, visibility. So non-hit, testable. We want either hidden, collapsed, visible. Now hidden let's say not visible but occupies layout space. Okay, what are the other options? Collapsed. Not visible and takes up no space in the layout. Okay, that probably sounds like a better option. What's this? Visible, don't want that. Visible, don't want that. And visible's obviously visible. But... So I'm going to go with collapsed. So for the time being, let's just have it, what was it set to before? It was set to non-hit testable. Let's leave it at that, but let's go back to our graph. But let's say on pressed, set vis ability. There you go, that's an option. Set visibility, and we want to set that to collapsed. Awesome. So let's hit compile and let's just play it. So there it is, visible, but then when it's pressed, it disappears. Brilliant. But then nothing else happens. So now that changes state or changes visibility, we can click on the button, and in our main HUD we can say on the visibility changing, let's do something. So on the visibility changed, start button. Once that changes, we want to play our sequence. So can we do play sequence? So we can, but first we need to create a level sequence player. We need to set up almost like a media player for playing the sequences. So let's click on that one. And which sequence do we want to play? So we should only have one in our level. It's the one that we've created. So we want to play intro sequence, which is our camera flying through our level. Now from the return value, we need to tell it to play, because at the moment all we've done is created a player which is going to be able to play the intro sequence. So if we do play now, you see we get a lot of options with play in it, or player. Now we've got play, that'll just start from wherever it was all the way through and never stop. But I only want to go so far through my loop, because at that point when it stops playing, I want to display a main menu, which we've not made yet, but we'll get to that. So play 2 is the one that we're going to want. Now it doesn't actually say like type in a number here to where do you want to go to. So we need to make a playback parameter. So what you can do is you can just press make movie sequence playback parameter, and then under frame that's expecting another load of junk, but we can split this, and then we can split frame number and then frame number value. Yeah, so now we're actually getting into it. So let's find out what frame we want to move to once we've pressed play. So if we go back to our sequence now, you know, let's fly through, and what was it? It was here. So, you know, that was 4 seconds. So let's see what options we've got actually. So time, what subframe, what frame number. I don't know, let's try 4 and let's see if we can do it with seconds. Position type, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back and change it to frames. Let's change the show time as, and let's change it back to frames, and I've got 118 there, but 120. Oh, back to the HUD. Frame number value, so we want 120. Let's hit compile. Let's press play and let's just test that. Okay, so for some reason we're already at the statue, and that's because I've just moved it forward, haven't I? So we've not actually told it yet to start right from the beginning. Let's just do that. Let's test it. So we're at the beginning, press start, and now we've got some motion. So in time now we should be sat at 120. So at this point we're going to want to bring up another menu. So let's do that. Okay, so for us to display a menu we actually need to build one. So let's just go back to our content browser and let's go back in our HUD folder. So we've got a main HUD and we've got a start button, but we haven't got like a main menu or yeah, just a menu to house it. So let's create one. So right click and go to user interface. Let's open up a widget blueprint. Let's give it an appropriate name. So let's call this selection menu or main menu. Selection menu, let's call it. Selection menu with a capital E. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Open that up. Oh, yeah, stop your game. I'm glad that popped up there. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to do desired on screen. So then we get an idea for what it looks like. So I'm just thinking now, how am I going to do this? I'm going to want a border around it. I want a white edge all the way around my thing. So I'm going to use a border. But then I want it to have a coloured background as well. So what I'm going to do, this is where it gets messy. Allows widgets to be stacked on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is under panel, I'm going to grab an overlay. And I'm going to drag that in. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to scroll back to the top, grab a border. And I'm going to put that. I'm going to change the order of these actually. So if you drag them and then move them over. I'm going to get this border. And I'll tell you what, is this going to work? Yeah, so with the border, I'm going to set that, I'm going to use that to set my size. So let's have the menu 700, let's keep that size, that's pretty good. And how tall do we want it? For now, let's just say 200, that's a bit short, isn't it? Let's say 450. 450 is alright for now, that'll do. Now, I don't want this to be like a really bright background like it is. So, okay, sorry about that. I just had to take a quick phone call there. Right, so the border there is bright white. So what we actually want to do is we want to change this brush color. We want to change the opacity down to, I don't know, something like 0.4 maybe. But obviously we can't see that effect because the border that we put in previously is still set to full color. I'm just going to click on this one and then set the alpha of this one to 0.4 as well, and that gives us this sort of like hazy transparent effect. I'm actually going to turn my sort of second border down to 0.2 just to make it a bit more transparent, and it's actually tucked up right in the corner here. I'm actually going to set this to full and full, but again the overlay is now set to we probably want to set that as a child of the original border. There we go. So that's now full screened. This overlay we want to have, I guess no padding, but then we want to set the inner border to have a 5 padding all around, I think. So that should give us a nice little separate edge. Yeah, that might work. Right, okay, so then with that, so we've got a border at 700 by 450 with its opacity turned to 0.4. Yep. We've then got an overlay as a child of that, just set to the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment as fill. We then want to go to border, and a border wants to be a child of your overlay, and we want to set that one to 0.2. We'll give that a padding of 5, just so it leaves like a sort of edge around it. And then within this border, because the borders can only take one child, it's probably now a good idea to put in a vertical box. Put in a vertical box, and yeah, we'll leave all the padding and stuff, that's fine. What we want to do now is put buttons inside this vertical box. So I'm just going to press compile. Now I don't want my start button, because when we press our start button it disappears, and that won't be any good for a main menu button. We don't want it to disappear. So I'm just going to get the start button and right click and go to duplicate, and I'm just going to put menu button. So with that menu button created, let's just double click on it. Let's go to the graph, and let's just say once you press it, well, let's just delete that because we don't want it to do anything just yet when we press it. Hit compile, and let's close that out. So now we go back to our selection menu, and under our vertical box, let's scroll down and find our menu button. Let's grab 4 of these. So menu button, menu button, menu button, and menu button. So I'm just going to rename these appropriately. So let's say continue and new game, and what else have we got? Let's say settings. Oh no, let's say load game. And then let's say options or settings, whichever you want. Settings. So I've changed the name of the button, but that's not changed the text of the button. Now, with this button selected, if you scroll down, there's not actually an option to change what it says. So let's go back to our start button and let's change that. Okay, so what I just said then about let's change the start button, that's actually incorrect. We actually want to change the menu button. I just carried on with the rest of that tutorial for another 5 to 10 minutes before I noticed that I was actually editing the wrong button. So that won't affect you, but yeah, just make sure that you've opened up the menu button rather than the start button, and then we can proceed. So, in your menu button, we want to change the text. So what you want to do is you want to select the text and you want to create a binding. So where it says content text, you want to create a binding and create that. Now what that's doing is that will update the text with whatever this node is given. So we need to create a variable now. So just press plus on a variable and let's just put button text. And make sure you click on this little closed eye and it'll turn into an open eye, and that means that the variable is public and editable. And also the current type is set to bool, which is this red dot, but if we hover over this we need a return type of text. So let's click on this little widget and change this to a text. Let's drag this over and let's plug that into there. So now anything that we assign to this button text variable will be displayed on the actual button. So if you hit compile, let's nip back to the graph just for a second and make sure that the instance is editable, and right, that should all be fine. Let's go back to the designer. Yep, and then under button now. So with the button selected, you can actually see that the default button text is going to be blah blah blah. So I'm just going to set this to text for now. Compile, and then let's just go back to where it says the text underneath the button. We originally had defaulted the entire text to that. I'm just going to delete that just so it's blank. Hit compile. Now every time we press play, this is going to default to text because we've set it up here. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to go back to our menu now and click on these, and you can see that the text here is sorry, there's a default and it's asking us for a text. So because this button is called continue, I'm going to type continue, and this one's new game, so let's put new game, and then the next one is called load game. Let's capitalise the right letter. And the last one is settings. Brilliant. Hit compile. And this won't display just yet because it only sets once you play. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So we're going to go back over to the main HUD now and go to our designer. And then we're going to scroll right down to the bottom and we'll see selection menu. We want to drag that in. And similarly to how we did before, we can make this the right size. So this was 700 by 500, was it? Or 450? I think I set this in. Let's set the anchor to center. Let's set and move these two. So it's centered. And I'm happy with that to be in the center of the screen this time. Let's just hit compile and play. So as we can see here now, all of our buttons have loaded in correctly. There is a bit of overlap here, but we can fix that. They don't actually do anything at the moment. But also, I've noticed because there's actually a bottom and a top line between the buttons. And there's one down. Oh, that was our start button. Because of this double line, they're sort of doubling up here in between, so we'll get rid of that as well. So nip over to the menu button, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of that top border. So I'm going to delete that. Hit compile. Let's press play. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks a bit better for me. I'm happy with that. And then this border here as well. Obviously, it's all the way across, which, you know, if you're into that, you can have that. You can set it to, you know, a specific size, but that's fine. What else did I want to change? In the selection menu, actually, the buttons were overlapping. You can see here that they're sticking out. How would we fix that? So I think it's because the button is actually wider than the... Yeah, that might be why. I think the button's actually bigger than the canvas that I've given it. So let's go back to the original border and let's set the actual size to 750. Okay, that works. And then if maybe we center the vertical box. There we go, that looks better. Let's hit compile and let's hit play. Let's see. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So you can tidy that up. Obviously you can spend more time on it. I think I've already spent enough time fighting with the UI. The UI is not my favourite thing, you can probably tell, but yeah. So let's make sure it's not visible at this beginning, at this part. So let's go. We can close the selection menu now, and we can close the menu button. So all we've got now is the main HUD. So with the selection menu, I'd say what we're better off change that size as well, aren't we? 750. There we go. So with the selection menu selected, if we scroll down now and find that visibility, and let's set it to collapsed. So by default, it's not showing on the screen. Yep. And I've noticed the text is missing from here, and that's because I carried on with the tutorial earlier. Let me just fix that. Start button. Yeah, it's because I changed all this. Graph. No, I didn't change it that far. Go back to the text. Start game. Remove binding. That should just be start game. Save. Play. Perfect. Right, so now we have start game. Let's go. We get through to here. And then bang. Here is where we want the menu to pop up. So let's do that. Okay, hopefully you're all still following me by at this point. So what we need to do now is we just need to set up the automation for this menu to pop up. Now we're going to need to go back to the main screen and we're going to want to select sequencer. Now what I'm going to do is, I know that when we get to, just using this little preview here, if you don't have this preview it's because you've not selected the camera. What you can do is in your sequencer you can either click on the camera actor like this and it should select it. By that point you can actually pilot as well and just jump straight to where it is. Yeah, we need to set up some automation for when we get to this point. We want the HUD to pop up the main menu. So for us to do that, we're going to need to set up an event. So what you can do is you can go to track and you can go to event track and you want to set up a trigger. This will give you this green line. And then because we're already at the position we want to start the trigger, you can just do a little tick like that. And that'll put this little star on your timeline. Now, for us to actually set up a trigger, what you need to do is double click on it. And then what it'll do, it'll bring up the sequence director. Now, this is the sequence event. This is the actual custom event, which is linked to this. You can see here, sequence event. What we can actually do is, let's rename that and let's just say show main, or let's just keep it simple. Let's show menu. So now if we go back, we can see here that show menu. So when we get to this point, show menu. Let's go back to the sequence director, and somehow we need to get into this this HUD. So we need to be able to talk to this HUD somehow. Now, knowing that this HUD was created or added to our viewport within the game mode, what we can do is get game mode. Get game mode. And as the game mode, what we can do is we've got viewport. No, we haven't. One sec. Let's cast to game mode. GM intro. Do that. Yep. And then actually, if we go to the game mode, so if you go back to your main viewport, go to blueprints, go to game mode or under project settings and edit. What we can actually do is this return value is the actual HUD itself. So if we drag off this, and we can do promote to variable, and we'll just connect these up. So what we can do, let's change the name of this variable to current HUD. Yep, that's fine. Let's compile that. Back in the sequence director now, we can get the current HUD. So now we've got a reference to our HUD. So within the HUD, we now know under the main HUD, there's this selection menu. So I tell you what, let's close the game mode for now. So as the current HUD, we can actually see the selection menu. So let's get that, and then we can set the visibility of it. So here we go. So we've triggered an event on our sequencer. We get to this point, we've triggered an event. This event then casts to our game mode, which has our HUD in it. And then the HUD has a selection menu. And we're now going to set the visibility to visible. So let's give that a try. And let's press play. Okay, so that's actually started from where I've left the progress. So I'll go back to your Elven Ruins, and where I've left it here, 120. I'm going to set that back to 0. I'll just press front. I'll address how to get this to go back to the beginning shortly, but for now let's just put it there. Let's press play, and our game starts. We hit start game. We fly through our level. We stop here, and our menu pops up. Perfect. And now we need to set up when we click a button, we continue to fly through. Now, if you want, because that was very, very instant, you could set a wait. Let's say, is it task wait? Wait a specific time. Okay. So let's wait for 1 second. Is that going to be enough? Let's have a little. What's this? Let's go back. Okay. Oh, I meant delay, not wait. Oh, this tutorial's getting long now. So I can tell because I'm making more mistakes as we go along. So duration, I want a delay for 1 second. Let's see if that works enough. So here we go. Ooh, here we go. Let's get into the game. Hit start. Boom. Menu. Now that feels a bit too long, like there's a delay, so I'm going to halve that. Give that another go. That feels better. So now we can set this next bit. So I like that. That sounds pretty good. Feels pretty good. So we don't need that start button. We can keep the HUD on for now. So we fly through. We get to our menu. So So now what we need to do is we need to set up, when we click these buttons, let's continue through the rest of it. So we need to be able to get a response from these buttons. So for us to do that, we actually need to go back to the content browser. We need to go to our menu buttons, and we need to set up some bindings for when these are clicked. So on pressed, not click, press, on press. Let's do an event dispatcher, and let's just put button pressed. Button pressed. And let's do a call. Okay, so basically an event dispatcher is when the button's pressed, it does this event dispatcher, which is basically it shouts out, "Hey everyone, the button's been pressed. If you want to do something with that information, now's your chance." And it just tells all the surrounding blueprints that something's changed, you know. And now what we'll do is we'll create a binding for that. So because we've pressed that, so here we go. So for the selection menu, if we go to the graph now, one sec actually, we need to go to the selection menu. So for each button now, what we need to do is go to the graph, and under the event pre-construct, obviously we've got all of these buttons, yeah, and we've now got a function that button pressed. So what should we do when that button's pressed, and what should we do when this button's pressed, and what should we do when this button's pressed, and then what should we do when this button's pressed. Now for each of your buttons you're going to have to do this. It's a bit tedious, but unfortunately that's the way it is. And then we need to create an event dispatcher for continue. Continue. Tell you what. Continue. Press. Another one for new. New game press. We need a load game press, and we need another one for settings press. So continue. You want to do a call. So we're essentially taking a dispatch and then passing on another dispatch. A new game, call, load game, call. Just line these up, keep them somewhat tidy, and then settings, call. There we go. So we've got an original press and we've turned it into 4 separate presses. So now that's all done and saved. From your selection menu, go back to your main menu. Now within the graph of this, you'll see here under your events, you've now got events that you can tap into if continue was pressed, or if new game was pressed, or if load game was pressed. So for the time being, all I'm going to do is set up the new game press. What do we want to do? So what we actually want to do is, sorry I was moving that over to make it neater, but we want to tap into this level sequence again now, because we want to play. But I don't want to drag it down over here and make it all messy, so I'm just going to move that over, and I'm going to promote this to a variable. And actually I need to delete that, that was a duplicate. I'm going to set this, that's fine, that's fine. Let's change the name of it to level sec, yeah, level sec, that'll do, level sequence. And essentially what I can do now is, let's get rid of that, I can drag that over here and get it. And we can drag off that and just put play to. So essentially this is the same as coming off here. We've just made it a bit neater. So when a new game press from the selection menu happens, we want to do this play to. And we want to, you can either split this, which will look nasty, or you can recombine and then drag off and make movie scene sequence playback parameter, similar to what we did earlier. And then you can break down the frame, and you can break down the frame number, and we want to play to, let's go back to Elven Ruins, go back to sequencer, and so we would have played from 120, and we want to play all the way to, what, 360. Play to frame 360. Brilliant. So let's have a go. Providing that I've done everything so far right, this should work as intended. So start game, fly through, delay, menu, new game. Whoa! Something didn't work there, did it? So, one other thing that we need to do is when a button's pressed, we need to get rid of that menu. We'll talk about the fact that the map flips upside down in just a second, but for now, what we want to do is we want to get this selection menu, and we want to set visibility, and we want it to be collapsed. Okay, let's try that. Hit start, fly through, menu, new game, boom, disappeared. Great. And it did reappear for some reason. So we got rid of that. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to move this back one frame. Can I do that? Let's just slide this over to zoom in a little bit. Tell you what, I need to zoom in a bit more. This is tedious. 19, there we go. So what I think's happening is, because we've actually paused on a frame, when we play again, it's actually doing the event twice, and I think it's reopening my menu. I don't remember doing that when I first built it, but I might have come across that and skipped over it. So that's now at 190 with a half a second delay. So if I press play now, yeah, let's go back to the beginning. Let's hit play, hit start, fly through, menu appears, new game, boom, right, and we get upside down. So I know what's happening here. So essentially, can you see here where the camera cut is? See how it stops there? It's because the camera cut, it technically cuts off. So we just want to grab the edge of this camera cut and just extend it all the way to the end of our scene. So now the camera will not turn off, it'll just carry on until the end. So let's hit play again, hit start, fly through, get to our main menu, hit new game, and then we continue to fly through to the end of our scene. Brilliant. Now, just for like a last minute effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of other things. Camera component. With that selected, if you scroll down, you'll see that you've got post-processing effects. Now, one of them is, let me find it, exposure. Now, if we turn that exposure up and down, you can see it gets dark and bright in the little preview. So what we can do, we can actually add a post-processing setting. We want lens and exposure, and which one is it? It is exposure compensation. Okay, so see what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pilot this camera just to get back to the scene, and then unpilot. Actually, I'm going to pilot it just so I can see what we're doing. So the exposure at the moment is 1. Yeah, but I think what we should have it as default by 1.8. So let's just track that at the beginning. We're going to go through the entire scene. But then when we get to about here, maybe. Frame 300. I'm going to start fading to black. So I'm going to create another keyframe here where it's still at 1.8, and then I'm going to skip to the last frame, and I'm actually going to set that to like -15 so I know it's black. And then I'm going to add a keyframe. So as you can see, for the last 30 frames, whoosh, fades to black. So that's going to give us a nice good effect of like fading out. So let's hit play, hit start, fly through the scene, get to the menu. We're going to start a new game, which is then going to take us to the entrance of the castle, and then we're going to fade to black. And then that's a perfect opportunity for you to then load your next scene, load your character creation screen, load your actual game, put a loading screen on. You know, you can work with the rest of it yourself. And obviously the reason why like we end up under the map here is because we're actually cutting away from this camera. What you can do is you can add another camera to your scene to switch to afterwards, and then you can just copy the last location where it'll be if you want. But I'd use that as a transition into something. That's why I'm not going to cover that, because what my intention of this menu was to use it as a transition into like a character creation screen or something like that. So I'd fly in, new game, fade out, character creation, or into a loading screen. Boom, done. So with all that said and done, I hope that was of some use to you. No doubt there's probably something that I've messed up. I say this in every video, to be honest, because I have very little faith in myself. Obviously these are not scripted. I go through these live as I'm recording them, so you know there is a few mistakes here and there. I tried to cut most of the mistakes out, but the ones which are just really basic I leave in. Yeah, I hope this was of use to you. If it was, please consider giving me a like. You know, leave some comments down below. Some feedback's always great. If there's any point in this entire video that you want me to touch on a little bit more, or give more detail about, or if you think I've not covered something enough, let me know. And you know, I'm happy to fulfill requests and get back to you. I will say there is a bit of a sort of a backlog on requests at the moment. I've got a few bits and pieces. With only making one video a week, I kind of get more requests now than I expect. I might just chuck out a couple of random videos here and there of just the stuff that's been requested. Let me know if that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, so if you've made it this far, well, really appreciate that. Thank you for watching, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, I guess. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye. I'm too. Let's watch some techniques.